Howdy, I'm Gary, Dillon Precision's Human Manual, and today we're going to unbox and install the Dillon Automation Auto Drive for the Dillon Precision RL1100 and CP2000 machines. Now, even though I'm Dillon Precision's Human Manual, I felt the need for some assistance, so I brought with me Chris Kersey. Chris is the Director of Engineering for Dillon Automation.
I'm here to help, Gary.
Awesome.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. Let's tackle this.
No problem.
Alrighty, before you install your new Dillon Automation Auto Drive on your RL1100 or CP2000, it's a good idea to round up all the tools that you're going to need to accomplish this job. So let's start off. You're going to need socket wrench. You're going to need a 9/16, 7/16, and 3/8. Accompanying open box end wrenches, you're going to need a 9/16. You'll need a 1/2 inch in case you have to tweak on your swage rod to get things out of the way. 7/16, 3/8. You're going to need a full set of hex key wrenches. You're also going to need the Muy Grande hex key wrench for the tool head. The pliers and crescent wrench are not necessarily required, but sometimes they'll fit into places where the other wrenches won't. And then if you have to adjust the timing on the tool head, this is a 6-ounce just dead blow plastic mallet, hard plastic on one end, rubberized on the other. Just makes life a lot easier when it comes to tweaking that adjustment. So round all that up and then we'll get ready to start making this great big change. The first thing you need to do before we even unbox the auto drive assembly is there's some steps we have to undo if you've already assembled your RL1100 or CP2000. You'll notice over here the case feed post is already gone, and you're going to want to remove these two pieces because the auto drive uses an entirely different post and has an entirely different feed system for collecting the loaded cartridges. So take this stuff off first. Now, what do we open up?
So we'll open up the large box that comes first, and you'll pull the crankshaft assembly and sprocket out first.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so we have here on top a manual that we're not going to need because it's us. We've got the new case feed post, which is much, much heavier than the original one because it's going to support a heavy box. We've got the adjustment handle that is forced off once we're done. Top layer of foam comes off to the side. Now, the big part. You're going to replace the crank assembly that your handle would normally go into because now it has a big sprocket and a little spring-loaded post that your adjusting handle can slip over temporarily. First thing is what? Pull off the...
Pull your priming system off first and let's get that out of the way.
Okay, so to do that, you'll need a 5/32 hex key wrench.
And while you're at that, when you remove that part of it, you want to remove the ratchet tab on the back and the restriction tab also. Those will no longer be needed on the assembly.
So they can go into the bin of unused parts.
Yes.
So that's off.
So you can lift that assembly straight up and then set it off to the side. And now you can remove the tabs we don't need.
Okay, and the tab uses...
It should be a 1/8 wrench.
Inch, yep. And there's one spring that might come zipping across when you pull this out, so just watch your eyes.
And then remove the silver ratchet from the tool head also, and then put that bolt back in the tool head.
Okay. Again, uses the 1/8 inch hex key wrench. Ratchet off. In the stack of parts we're not going to use anymore. Reinstall the ratchet bolt because that's what makes the primer system go back and forth.
And so the next thing you'll want to do is remove your tool head. You want to cycle the head in the low position so you can remove the main bolt on top.
There. We use tools. So that, pop this.
So go ahead and release it and let it come back up before you take all the threads out. Now you can finish unloosening the bolt. The head's going to be spring loaded slightly because of the tool head pin that's in there, the spring that's in there. And so you can also take and then lower this assembly so it doesn't drop on you. And then also remove the spring and the cup because that will no longer be needed.
So push this spring and cup up from the bottom because this is a very greasy part. And this goes into the pile of not needed parts.
Not needed parts.
Next step is...
You can loosen the bolt on that side, and then you'll want to loosen the 2 screws on this side for the swaging system. Should be a 3/16.
So there's that cap. That's what holds this shaft on.
And we'll save that for reuse.
You'll use the 5/32 hex key wrench. You don't need to remove this plate entirely. I usually just pull out one side completely and then just pivot this back out of the way. Now we need to remove the swage rod. So to do that, there's a clevis pin and we can just hook that and it pulls out. Pin is out. And in theory, we can pivot this down.
And you can either leave that rod in there and let it sit or completely pull it out if you want.
Slide off your eccentric cam that operates the swage rod.
Now you're ready if you want. You can either leave this in position or you can take the rod out and then you should be able to gently slide out the whole crank assembly now.
Okay, so we'll leave that in there. And a helpful hint, put this in just a few turns because now it's going to give you a handle for the shaft. So now it should be able to just grab this, withdraw it. Now you'll notice the key here and the bearing. Notice the direction of the key and the eccentric so that you put it back together the right way. So now we're going to pop the little greasy key out.
Pop those off and then you'll want to take and slide your eccentric on first.
Okay, so this goes into the pile of unused parts. Eccentric goes on first.
Slide your bearing on.
Bearing.
And slide your key back in.
And we've got our eccentric lined up.
And so this is the part where you want to grab the top nut and lift up on it to get the whole journal assembly up. And then you can slip it in. And just make sure the key is facing the back of the machine and it should slide back into the eccentric.
There it goes. Then get that bearing lined in.
And then you'll watch the other side and make sure that other bearing's pushed back in and then you can replace the cap on that side.
And then again, we use the 3/16 hex key. Put the cap on, hold the sprocket with one hand, and tighten it as tight as you can by hand, and you'll be fine. So now we get to start putting some stuff back on.
So let's go ahead and put the pin back in the eccentric for the swaging, and then bolt that back together.
With a ball end wrench, you can get in there at an angle and tighten that up. And that just needs to be snug. You don't need to torque it at all. It's not a small block Chevy. Now we get to align it and put the little pin in place, and put the keeper back on that clevis pin. Alrighty, tool head back on.
Tool head back on.
And to do that, you're going to have to pull the case feed plunger to the rear.
It's going to spring a little bit because of the spring in the priming system pushing it back up.
Yeah. And about how tight?
About 10 to 15 foot-pounds is all you really need.
So
just a good snug.
There.
And so at this point, you're going to go through your machine and you're going to want to retime the indexing on the machine and make sure the tool head is cycling correctly without any movement in the shell plate.
Now when you use this handle, you'll notice that there's finger grooves on one side. The finger grooves will be towards the back of the table.
It won't
reach.
It won't reach there. And so to set your indexing, you can go slightly up and down till you hear the click of the index pawl, click. And then just make sure that it's fully indexing to the position. You can put a light little bit of pressure with your index finger on the shell plate just to make sure it clicks into position. If it goes by itself, then your indexing is set. If not, you'll have to release the screw on the back here, back it out a half a turn, and then adjust from there for indexing.
It's just barely hitting the shell plate.
Okay, and so just watch which direction it's moving the shell plate with the tool head, and then you'll adjust the head just slightly the opposite direction, just to make sure when the alignment pin comes through, there's no movement to the shell plate.
Okay, it's just barely advancing the shell plate in the counterclockwise direction.
So let's raise it all the way to the highest part, and just take a soft dead blow mallet and just give it a tap, either back here on this solid part or on this front edge over here to rotate it the direction you want to go.
Okay, because we want it to go in that direction.
Yep.
So
And then check,
it doesn't take much. Be gentle. If you hit it here, you will break the tool head, and then you'll have to buy another tool head because breaking it there is not covered under the warranty.
Your alignment looks pretty good there, Gary.
Alrighty, so now let's put the primer system back on. And when you do that, this slot goes over the bolt, and the finger on here has to go into the right spot in the priming system. And you don't need to torque these screws down either. Again, priming system is not a small block Chevy, so just finger tight with the hex key wrench is all it needs. Make sure the primer slide goes back and forth.
And now you're ready for the next step.
Alrighty. And the next step is going to be to attach the case feed post.
Yep.
So we need our new post. We also need our chute for the loaded rounds.
And that'll come in the smaller of the two boxes.
Alrighty.
That you'll want to unbox.
Let's pull that box up here. It has a built-in carry handle.
So you're going to want the cardboard box inside, which has all the accessories for the machine.
Alrighty. Okay, so in here we have a bunch of cords, we have hoses, bag of hardware, and this lovely device is what will guide your veritable waterfall of loaded cartridges into whatever bin you select. And it replaces the plastic bin that normally mounts on the left side of your machine.
So let's get the hardware and the bracket out of there.
Okay, there's a chain, spacers, bracket, 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 bracket. So
First one you'll install is this bracket here.
okay.
And that replaces the old cartridge bin mount.
So that bolts on there.
And you'll use a post with no washer on it. And then use the other post with the washer on the bottom, and then you can reuse this short screw.
That's the screw out of this bracket. This bracket goes into the no longer needed parts pile. That fits through the hole in the post to snug this post on to hold that bracket on. Now we're going to reuse this bottom post with the washer on the lower part of the frame. And again, using leverage and the little hole in that post, cinch it snug. And we've got some pieces to install on here before we can actually attach the post.
So you'll install your two shield mount bracket pieces first on the post. And so the three gold nuts face you looking at the machine.
So these will face forward, and they will be up near the top than they are to the bottom.
So the little bullet mounts for the locators face towards the top of the post.
So the pointy end goes up.
And then you'll have a bag of small hardware here, and you'll utilize the number 10 button heads that are in there, and there's 2 per.
And that uses 1/8.
1/8.
Is there a washer?
No washers.
So they just thread in. There's already threaded inserts in the post that they just screw into. And then just snug these up with the 1/8 inch hex key wrench and install the second one. And this time we're going to put the top one in first.
Now your post is ready to install on the machine.
Now that our post is assembled properly, we can attach it using the original mounting hardware that would have come with your RL1100 or CP2000. Now that we have the mounting post back on the machine with the new mounting post, what's next to install?
At this point, you're ready to install the main base mount that has the motor drive on it to your table, and then install your machine onto the base mount.
Now this plate has exactly the same bolt pattern as the bottom of your machine, so it makes it real simple. We have a couple of pieces to install on this bracket.
will be your front tab, which locates the safety shield.
Now, does this go underneath or on top?
It goes on top, and then you'll put the nut and the washer on the bottom.
So put those in. It uses a washer and a nylock nut. And this uses what size?
You use a 3/8 wrench, open end wrench, and then just an 1/8 inch wrench. And just snug those.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of weight resting on this. It's just the plexiglass shield that this supports. Mm-hmm. Then this piece mounts with the bullet end pointed up using the same hardware. Alrighty. Is there anything else we need to mount on here, or is this ready to go?
It's ready to go. All you need to do is mount this to your table now, and then mount your machine onto the frame.
The machine out of the way. And this has got the same bolt pattern as your machine. And how tight do these need to be, Chris?
Just 5 to 10 foot-pounds, just good and snug.
Alrighty.
So next you'll mount your frame onto the plate with the provided hardware. You'll have a nut and a washer on the bottom and a bolt with the nut that goes through the frame.
So we got washers on top and bottom.
Yes, sir. You can just use a 7/16 wrench and a socket to tighten those down. As you get ready to tighten that down, make sure the machine is pushed all the way to the back of the plate and as square as you can get it with the plate when you tighten it.
Oh, come on. You want the sprocket and the motor to be in the same plane?
That usually helps. So your next step, you want to set the drive chain on the unit. The small chain comes pre-tensioned from the factory, so all you have to do is set this one on and then set the tension. You'll want to push the motor assembly forward to give you slack. And just fold the chain over the top. Then you can gently pull back on the motor assembly, and it will tension the chain. And then you'll take a 9/16 wrench, you'll tighten the top bolt first, and then your 2 adjuster bolts on the bottom.
Okay, the idea is that this chain needs to have a little bit of movement in it. Not a lot, but just a little bit. Because this is what the motor pivots on.
And about 10 to 15 foot-pounds is plenty enough on those.
Okay, so again, verify you have just a little bit of up and down movement in the chain. Okay, the next step is to put on the shield that keeps your fingers from getting in here accidentally. So this is held on. You've got a spacer and 3 sets of hardware. So it's easier if you put the front one in first. So this will go through the hole. The spacer goes here. Line that up over the shaft. And this uses 5/32.
Yep, a 5/32 and a 7/16 wrench.
Okay.
And it's key to make sure you put the washer on the bolt on the outside of the chain cover.
And you just barely want to snug these, I imagine.
Yep.
That's all the tight they need to be so you don't crack the plastic.
So next we'll want to install the proximity sensor for the unit. And so it comes pre-assembled in the bag with the installation nut. Since every one of these frames is slightly different in the casting in the back, you'll have to adjust the fingers on there to fit your frame and then tighten it down.
So these maybe have to bend outward just a little bit more. And it doesn't need to be a perfect fit. It can be a little sloppy, that's okay. And then that secures to the stop bolt in the back of the frame by a regular nut, 7/16 size. And just snug it.
So next step, you want to install the control box onto the post.
The control box is this big blue heavy beast. It's industrial grade. Notice it doesn't look like a tablet.
And this is where you might want to get a friend to help you. You can start with the top screw first, and then the subsequent screws.
And what, inch pounds on this?
At least 5 foot-pounds. You know, you want it good and tight on this one so the box stays stable on the post.
Yeah, because you're holding up a fair amount of weight here.
So once you've got that installed, you can start plugging in all your peripheral stuff.
So first of all, you've got a white plug, and then you have a 15-pin.
And once you plug that in and you tighten the 2 finger screws down, just very, very light. No screwdrivers needed.
Yeah, there is a flat slot in here for a screwdriver. Please don't use it because you can strip out the part easily.
And so the next you'll install your proximity sensor into the bottom of the box. It's the only unique barrel plug that's on the bottom.
So it's going to be in the front, correct?
The very front. All these plug in with a key on them, and then you twist and screw the connector in.
Just finger tighten them.
Just finger tight.
And they are labeled on the underside of this box too, so you know which one plugs where.
And so next you'll install your safety shield switch.
And that goes into...
Plug labeled safety cover.
Okay, so it's located directly behind the proximity sensor.
And so you'll take the 2 number 10 screws and install that bracket into the pre-tapped holes back here.
So that bolts to the back of the case feed post.
Yes. And so now you're ready to finish installing all the accessories. You can do your cartridge chute. And there's 2 button head screws with nuts and washers supplied. Washer goes on the screw.
And that uses?
A 1/8 and a 3/8 inch open end.
Okay. And those are nylock nuts, so they're not going to go anywhere once they're tightened.
Same thing with the chain cover, just lightly tighten those so it doesn't crack the plastic.
Alrighty, that's snugged up.
And so the next thing you'll do, you remove your old spent primer bracket and you'll install the new tube mount.
That's going to use our same 1/8, and we're using the same hardware.
Same bolt.
So that comes off, goes into the pile of not to be used parts.
And so from here now you're ready to plug the stop switch in and the power cable.
So this is a manual off switch.
Stop switch, which is in the back left corner, and then your power cable.
And power cable just...
It goes all the way in the front in the black assembly.
Yep. Alrighty, now that everything is mounted on the machine as far as the auto drive is concerned, there are some sensors that we have to preset. The first one is the proximity sensor. So in order to run that, you have this really cool handle. So we lift the handle all the way up, reach underneath, there's a rocker switch, and you'll notice we have a light control panel. And it says Dillon Automation, cycles counted 1,077. Because when these control boxes are put together, we have a test fixture that cycles it 1,000 times just to make sure all the electronics are working properly, so we know it's going to work when it gets to you. So now we've got the handle up.
With the unit in the up position, you'll want to take and loosen the 2 nuts on the home switch, and you'll adjust the home switch until the little light comes on.
Okay, so loosen the nut that's closest and give yourself just a little bit of play.
Okay. And then what you'll do is you'll hold onto the body of the switch and you'll loosen the nut that's closest to the crank assembly just until the light comes on the switch.
Okay, so that's where we're at.
And so once the light comes on, you'll go 1 flat past to give it a little more movement in and then tighten everything down.
There, and the light stays on.
And you're good. So that's your home position for the top. And then once you get ready to run the machine, you'll bring it to the lower end, and that's your bottom stop. Every time you do that, the machine recalibrates the stroke and sets it for the cycle.
So we have to start with the tool head in the down position.
Down position.
Take the handle off.
And so to run the machine, you're going to have to set your safety cover on. So what it does is you'll flip this over, and on the left side of the safety cover are the 2 ears. Those will mount on the 2 bullet faces.
Those mount there. That mounts there. And when this is mounted, it's depressing that micro switch that we set up earlier. Because if that micro switch is not down, it's not going to run. Safety feature so you don't get your fingers caught in there.
And so the very first time you cycle the machine, run the speeds all the way down to the lowest setting it'll run.
Okay, so all the way counterclockwise.
All the way counterclockwise. And then you can go ahead and hit start. All right, everything's cycling correctly. The stop button and the hand switch both do the same function. This one just gives you a little bit of a remote to it.
Yeah.
You need to make sure the machine's cycled in the full down position to start. If it's not, it'll error out like it just did and tell you a short stroke to make sure that you've gone the full cycle of the machine.
So then at this point, we have to remove the cover, use the hand wrench, cycle the handle all the way down, and return the cover. So it'll start again. And what I wanted to show is you've got this switch, you've got the hand switch, but also you've got an emergency stop here that just flat shuts off power to it. If you hit this stop button or that stop button, it'll finish at the end of the cycle. And it just up here, it'll say machine halted, stop switch, and then you would hit start.
Well, you'd bring it back down to the lower end again. You always have to start with the machine at the bottom of the stroke, because it recalibrates itself every time to the stroke of the machine.
Okay. Again, lift it off. And now we can start again. But if there's an emergency, slap the big red button, it just stops it wherever it's at.
And so then you'll have to go back through the same cycle to restart the machine up.
Yeah.
And to reset the button, you'll just turn it clockwise and it should pop out.
Okay. So again, off, handle down. And resume. Alrighty, Chris, now that we've got it set up, we've hit the start button, the tool head and machine cycles up and down. How do you adjust the settings? And what speeds do you want to run the different tasks that you might do on here?
So you'll go into the menu select function, and it's just simply just lightly pushing the button until it clicks. And that'll take you into the main menu. There you can go in and reset your counter, which is your cycle counter, kind of like your trip odometer for what you're running that day. You can adjust your top and bottom delay in the machine. They're independent. You can go from 0 to about 2,000 milliseconds, which is about 2 seconds delay. And that's more for if you're waiting for a long powder drop at the bottom or trimming, or you've got something,
Say you're
specific.
making 223 into 300 blackout, you want to give it a longer down dwell time than if you were just depriming and sizing 9mm.
Yes. And so you can go through those functions, and to select it, you just can rotate the knob and it'll bounce down it'll step down as it goes.
Yeah, there's a little arrow that appears next to
it.
Next to the index.
And so you'll have counter, top delay, bottom delay, and then the very last one is a test mode, and that's to test the function of all the sensors on the machine to make sure everything's working correctly. So if you have a problem and it's not running and it's popping up on the screen saying your safety shield switch is not activated, you can come into this function and see if that switch is communicating with the controller itself.
Okay, well, let's walk through these from the top to the bottom.
So your counter is your top one. You push the button again to select it, and you can click and hit reset 0, and it just resets that trip odometer for the day.
Okay.
And so you can index again to the top delay, and so you'll come down to set new value, and then you can go by 100 millisecond increments up to 2,000 milliseconds.
Yeah, so 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second for a point of reference.
Yeah. So we'll just set it to 500 milliseconds real quick, and then we'll run it and see. And then you'll go, once you set it, you have to always hit the back button to change out of that menu. And then we'll go to the bottom delay, and then we'll go set new value. We'll add in 500 milliseconds there, push the button to set it, and then go back. And then you can come back to the main menu, and you're ready to run.
Okay, and so in order to start it now, again, we have to take the cover off.
Cycle the machine to the bottom cycle.
So pull that off all the way down. Okay.
So now that you're down, you can hit the start button. It'll go through its first home cycle.
That's when it's resetting. And
then you can see the delay at the bottom, and we'll speed it up a little bit and you'll see more of the delay in there. And it just pauses a slight second at the top and bottom of the stroke. And they're independently adjustable, as is the speed going up and down.
Okay. So that if you're doing a case, say a 9mm major load, where the case is full of powder, you want the upstroke to go slower so you don't sling powder out of the shell plate.
Mm-hmm. And if you're doing 223 with an extruded powder loading, you can put some dwell at the bottom to give it time to feed.
All the powder drops out of the measure and into the case. Mm-hmm. Well thought out.
Thank you.
So let's run it for a minute.
Let's double check and make sure we're at the bottom of the downstroke.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. And so one of the features we added into it, so say you're setting it up for loading and you want to check your size on a case and just run a single case through the function. Mm-hmm. You don't have to start and run the machine. You can push and hold the jog button, and it's a preset speed in the machine, and so it'll slowly cycle through, and you can just process that one case through, you know, the size die, the swaging station, the deprime, to double check everything.
Awesome.
And so as long as you hold it, it'll function through the function through the jog mode.
So you can then pull the cartridge or case out at any station, check head space, check bullet seating depth, check crimp, weigh a powder charge.
And so same thing with as running the machine, the jog cycle always has to start at the bottom of the stroke.
So as soon as you let go of the yellow button, when you want to resume using the machine, again, you have to pull the cover plate off, use the handle to cycle the tool head down to the bottom end position, and then reinstall the cover.
And so all of your speed adjustments you can do on the fly. So you can adjust the up and down independently. And so as you do that, the machine recalculates for your cycle count per hour.
So it tells you how many cycles per hour you're going to get. So.
And that takes in, you know, consideration your up speed, your down speed, and your dwell top and bottom.
Okay. So right now we're running at 1,345 cycles per hour. So that would be a good speed, say, for loading rifle cartridges. And then to turn the speed up.
So clockwise rotation for the down or the up. And so it's just a simple movement. And once you do get to the end, the dials only go so far.
Okay, so it has a limit built into it.
And so now you're cycling at about 1540 an hour.
Yeah, we're 1541 cycles per hour now. So if you're just processing 9mm brass and you want to run this at like 22 or 2300 cycles per hour, what would that look like?
So to get to that fast for processing, you want to remove the dwell for 9mm. So we'll stop the machine here. We'll go back into the menu. And you can go back in where it says set new value. We'll turn that back down to 0. We'll go to the bottom delay, set new value, go back to 0.
And back to the main counter.
Back to the main counter. Make sure the machine's in its lower position.
Okay, the cover's back on. Let's see what it'll look like at the higher end.
So we'll go ahead and start it where we were at. And so right there, we're running about 2,800 rounds an hour. And that'll be a good, comfortable speed for processing 9mm and pistol brass.
Yeah, you really don't want to go faster than this, because if you get a case with a slightly bent rim operating at the higher speed, it's a higher likelihood that the machine's going to stop. You're going to have to clear it. So try to avoid the top end speed. It's kind of like racing your mom's muscle car when you were a kid. It's bad for the clutch sometimes. So Chris, when I was installing the sensor wires underneath this industrial size control panel, I noticed there's some places that aren't being used currently. Is there something in the but wait, there's still more to come department?
Yes, there is. Hopefully this summer we'll have all the rest of the sensors that go with the unit. You'll have a low primer, a low powder sensor for loading with a bullet topple. You'll also have, for case processing, a Berdan primer detection sensor. It'll also detect the step 9mm cases. And if you have the optional auto kicker on it, it'll automatically kick those cases out for you when it detects it.
Now, if I'm loading large prime 45 ACP and encounter a small primed case, will it work for that too?
It'll detect that and it'll automatically kick it out for you. And if you're processing 223, it'll detect a ringer and it'll kick that case out for you also.
Alrighty, so if you are prepared to upgrade your already industrial RL1100 or CP2000 to the next level, then you're going to add the Dillon Automation Auto Drive to it. The Dillon Automation Auto Drive has a 1-year warranty, and using the Dillon Automation Auto Drive does not void the warranty on your RL1100 or CP2000, unlike if you were to use an unauthorized auto drive on our machines. You can find us on the World Wide Web at dillon-automation.com or at DA3000.com. Order today.